Right now, I want to look at Betfred and beyond. As I was telling you at the top of the show, billionaires, they're also Tory party donors, it has to be said. So there's an argument here that the Tories are benefiting from gambling. But the donors, Peter and Fred Doan, the brothers who own the high street bookmaker Betfred, are also profiting from a business that treats gambling addicts. So the Doans hold a sizable shareholding in this business called Health Assured, which has won dozens of government contracts to provide health and wellbeing programs to staff. Its taxpayer-funded clients include a number of NHS trusts that also treat gambling addicts, as well as MPs' employees, some of whom campaign for tighter restrictions on gambling. The Doans have something like £5.2 million in dividends from the business in the past 3 years, so they're doing all right from it. And as I said, they're Tory party donors. I think they've given over £350,000 to the Tories since 2016. And as I also said earlier, it must take quite a shock to get Ian Duncan Smith to be critical. Now, he does co-chair a cross-party group on gambling, and he said that he felt it was a cynical position by the brothers. Now, I also want to go a little further with this and look at other businesses or other sectors that may also be profiting from problems that they could be contributing to. And I have to say, smoking is one. You look at, the government makes £9 billion in revenues from tobacco sales. It spends about £5 billion on NHS treatment for smokers, which means at the end of the day, the Treasury ends about £4 billion better off, thanks to smokers. Joining us to discuss, Alfie Stirling, Head of Economics at the New Economics Foundation, who I'm sure have got plenty to say about this, as they sort of promote social, economic and environmental justice, none of which I see present in Betfred. Afternoon to you, Alfie.
Hi there, thanks for having me on.
Pleasure. Were you surprised by the Doan's curious interest in both gambling and then dealing with problem gamblers?
No, well, I'm not surprised, unfortunately. I think, in terms of the way you introduced the topic, I think you were spot on in terms of saying, how widespread this type of activity is. That's not to say that that Ian Duncan Smith isn't right to call it cynical. I call it cynical and egregious, and it's counterproductive to good social outcomes if we're seeing industries or individuals profiteering from the harm they contribute towards in the first place. But it is widespread, and that's a problem as well.
So I can't think of any legal reason why the Doans shouldn't have both an interest in a gambling firm and in a firm that treats problem gamblers. It just it doesn't sit very well with me, sort of with my own personal morals. It's not something I would feel comfortable doing.
No, I think that's right. There definitely isn't a legal constraint to doing so. But this is a lot deeper than just the choices made by individuals, because actually the way in which we measure progress in the economy, if anything, incentivizes this type of activity. So if I take the main example of this, so we tend to think about economic success in terms of GDP. How big is the economy? How much is it growing? Now, GDP is a measure of just output. It's a measure of how much are we producing, how much profit are we making. And so actually one of the perverse things is that, if a whole lot of people buy loads of sugary food or high salt food in fast food stores, that will create lots of GDP because of the wages and the profit that's generated. And then, of course, if people also end up with health side effects or diabetes, they'll go to the NHS, and then we'll spend again hundreds of millions, if not billions, treating and reversing some of those adverse side effects. But unlike the number you talked about earlier, where you said 9 billion in tax revenues and 4 billion in spending, and you deduct one from the other, GDP does the opposite. It adds the two together. It says we've done a whole load of stuff making sugary food, and we've also spent a whole load of money and paid salaries treating it, and we add the two together, and they both contribute towards GDP, and then we kind of clap ourselves on the back and say, well, we're progressing and we're richer. But actually, we're not solving problems. We're not actually making people's lives better. So we're measuring the wrong thing.
I had no idea. It's bonkers is what it sounds like to me. Absolutely bonkers that we see both ends of the problem as being of benefit to the economy.
That's right. It is bonkers. And I think the problem is that we are too attached to output per se, to just activity of any kind. And we don't ask the really key question, which is, what are the problems we're solving? Are we making people's lives better? Because it's not really GDP's fault. It wasn't designed to measure whether we're solving people's problems, but we should be measuring that, and that should actually be at the core of our economy, and bringing it back to gambling and particular industries. We should be holding industries and businesses to account against the problems they're supposed to be solving for society.
I suppose we should also look, I suppose we have to look really as well at how we fund political parties, because I know a lot of people recoil at the notion of state funding of political parties. They think, my precious tax pounds being wasted on politicians and the inevitable lies and miscues they give in elections and so on. However, we've got the liberalisation of gambling thanks to Labour. The Dones have done very well out of it. I think they're billionaires, aren't they? I think 117th richest people in the country. And they make 5.2 million in dividends from the business that helps, amongst other people, problem gamblers. And then they give £375,000 to the Tory party since 2016. And you sit there and, I don't want to cast aspersions, but I'm left wondering, well, what motivation does our government have to address problem gambling and such like when they're beneficiaries of that very problem?
Yeah, I think that's an entirely valid point. I think political funding is a murky industry, and I think you're right that some people do have some reticence about public funding, but really, at the end of the day, we get the political system we're prepared to pay for, and if we're not prepared to pay for it, then others will, and that ends up being a slightly murkier and more harmful outcome if you've got particular interests that get to influence our politicians.
Our tax money is going into health assured, that they're winning government contracts, which means taxpayer-funded contracts. So we're worried about the state funding of political parties, but that would break the link between firms like gambling firms that may businesses that could have an impact, a negative impact on certain sections of society. So even though we don't want to put our tax money into political parties, we are indirectly, as clear as day, doing just that, as this example proves with Betfred.
Yeah, that's right. And I think this point also is wider than just, what people think about as immediate politics, because actually there's a lot of research and which feeds into the arguments and the debate around political issues like this, which has also been funded by vested interests. So, I know that that charities associated with the gambling industry that are also funded by the gambling industry, in turn have funded research to look at things like, which often sensibly look like a positive thing, that they want to look at what is the harm that problem gambling, for example, causes and how much does it cost government. But the reason they're doing it is to build a case to then go to government and say, right, this is costing you, $1 billion a year. You should release $200 million a year to us to help fix the problem. What,
if anything, Alfie, can be done to break these links? I mean, as we said earlier, there's no laws being broken. It's just it's cynical. That's what Ian Duncan Smith said. But can we move further than that? Is there any sort of groundswell of support? Any call from people saying, this has got to end? That you can't simultaneously profit from gambling and profit from taxpayers in dealing with people with problems, gambling problems.
I think there's a few things you can do. I mean, there's in public procurement, you could bring in additional regulations to be a lot more careful as to who is eligible to deliver certain services in the public interest.
Sounds perfectly common sense to me. Yes.
And I think that's probably a slightly larger point, is that in the economic jargon, what's really going on here is harm has been caused by a certain activity, and economists call this a negative externality. And it's a quite slightly horrible framing, because it kind of assumes that the price of something normally includes all the harm a product might cause, and an externality in fact has been left out. But actually, if we were pricing things properly, so if we were taxing gambling properly, or in other areas as well, carbon emissions, if the cost of fossil fuels was truly reflected the harm that is caused by burning fossil fuels themselves, then actually we'd actually stop a lot of this harm happening in the first place, because it's reflected in the original price, and it would reduce the profits made at source.